Welcome to Season 6 of the Stories in the Cemetery podcast. This season, we're shaking things up a bit with deeper questions into the paranormal. And to do that, your host, Nicholas McGirr, has invited the owner of Amen Paranormal Research, Joshua Amen, to be his co-host. To learn more about their studies and articles, visit storiesinthecemetery.com, or you can check out the Paranormal Investigation Workbook or the Paranormal Investigator's Almanac, both available on Amazon. Stories in the Cemetery takes you ghost hunting in Charleston, South Carolina, and reveals his findings from those investigations here on the Stories in the Cemetery podcast. Let's get into today's episode with Nick and Josh.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of the Stories in the Cemetery podcast. I am Nick, your host from Stories in the Cemetery, and I have my co-host,
Josh Wyman from Amen Paranormal Research.
And from the podcast, Tales from a Ghost Hunter. So, I know. Yeah, look at that. So, folks, let's get through some show notes because we got some pretty interesting shit to talk about. Like, there's a lot to unpack with this one. So let's kind of get through tours. So tours, interactive ghost hunting experiences in Charleston, South Carolina. Obviously, I am still doing those because that is the bread and butter. And Josh is hosting the paranormal scavenger hunt on the opposite side of the country, in case you're ever in the Pasadena, California area. Tease and merch for both Amen Paranormal Research and Stories in a Cemetery can both be found on TeePublic. And I've heard rumor as of lately that was changing. So we're recording this really early. So if it's changed, I mean, the link's going to be in the show notes anyway. Yeah, I heard some rumors through other podcasts that they had to switch things over. I haven't had to do that yet. So yeah, Josh, I'll keep you posted. I heard it was going over to Dasher. So,
how's a Dasher?
It looks
exactly my food.
Yeah, it looks just like the guy that brings you your food. I looked at the Dasher website. It's identical to TeePublic. So again, I don't know what that looks like, but again, if by the time this comes out, it's changed. The link will be in the notes. So we'll kind of take things one day at a time. The Stories in a Cemetery Paranormal Investigators Almanac and the Paranormal Investigation Workbook are both out. So link is in the notes, but of course, Josh and I were going to talk this thing up like crazy, and especially now that we're in the month of September, we are always looking for more writers or a paranormal expert in the field for the 2026 Paranormal Investigators Almanac. So if you think like you are one of those folks, you can always reach out to us through our social media platforms or just head over to storiesinthecemetery@gmail.com and send us an email. Let's see, my fiction work. If you're special, what?
So if you're special, if you're paranormal, or if you're paranormally special.
Wow, that's a really bad tagline. I don't think we're gonna use that. Like that's a really bad tagline. That's a bad hashtag. Yep, it's gonna stay in the podcast, special. But we're not gonna put it like as a hashtag out there.
Oh come on!
Paranormally
hashtag
special.
Paranormally special.
Wow, Josh, marketing. Websites. You can always head over to storiesinthecemetery.com or amenparanormalresearch.com and leave us reviews through whatever podcatcher you're listening to this from, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever the hell you're listening to us in your ear holes. We would appreciate any type of review that you would leave for us. And of course, only 5 ghosts will apply. So, Josh, this top, I don't even know what the hell we're calling this episode. I guess let's get into science.
Paranormally special.
Paranormally special. No, it is not the name of the episode. Wow. He's gonna stick with that, I'm sure, through the entire episode, everybody. So just bear with us. We're having a good time tonight. We're recording multiple episodes, and we're just having fun with this. But I think this should be how to break into weird science. All right, so. I know we can't take the full name of Weird Science because of the movie and all of that, but how to break into the paranormal field from a pseudoscience into an actual science. And if you haven't caught on yet, folks, like Josh and I are really about diving in instead of throwing just cat balls and K2s out there. We really like to see how the shit goes down, how it works, why does it work, and why things don't work. So I think with pushing what we're trying to do out here, of pushing the paranormal into an actual science that's recognized by the science community, we're going to talk about why others have failed to do this and a bunch of other like subtopics on this matter. So Josh, let's start off with, why do you think other people haven't been able to do this?
I don't think it's so much that people haven't been able to do this as much as it's kind of like they didn't want to do this. And what I mean by this is, do I want to put in all this work and try all these things that nobody cares about or pays attention to or looks at? Or do I want to run around and scream demons, and make lots of money?
Yeah, and the dollar sign I think is a big part of this. With that, I mean, more recently with the TV shows and social media and, people just trying to make a quick buck. Yeah, I could see where, certain people that just run around and scream demons, or, maybe have family members try to kill them, that they would actually you put that out there. Right? We can say it like that.
Yeah. Now it's old.
It's drama. It's really about the drama that people are attached to, and there's that raised emotion piece that I bring up again. But I don't think it's from lack of people wanting to put ghosts into, a real science.
Well, it makes the people that actually want to very sparse. There's far and few between. And, I mean, you could basically say it as what it is. We don't get any attention because of it. And it's hard. Like, we put in some serious work to get the numbers that some of these guys get by running through a haunted house, wailing, flailing their arms, and it's because it's serious. Like, we're serious about what we're doing, and because we're serious, we're not popular, and because we're not popular, we're not well funded. Because we're not well funded, we can't do the experimentation we want to do.
This is true.
Which is all counterproductive. So, I mean, do we act like idiots for a few years to make good money and then get serious? No, because then nobody will take you serious.
Take us serious, right? It's an oxymoron.
Yeah, so we're kind of stuck in this limbo of like, well, you know what? One of these days, somebody who makes good money or just is born that way, with their golden spoon, and, maybe they decide to take this seriously and do this right. And then we'd have somebody who's well-funded who can take it seriously.
Right, it's true.
For the time being, I mean, it's a lot of our hard-working Joes just out there trying to make it work, trying to figure it out. And some of us, like the ones that are doing it, they're like, screw it. I'm going to keep it to myself. I'm going to work on it, and I'm going to try and come up with something that's actually concrete before I just go splaying it out there, and then we put it in books and we put it in like written articles, and the community we're in will acknowledge us, but that's about it. I mean, my interview with Barry is a great example. He's a genius. Man has done so much, with the field, and has really started trying to push the boundaries of it. And because of the fact that, like, people outside the niche, they're not going to pay attention, and they don't, and it sucks. Because he's done a lot of really, really cool, interesting things with this. And it's helped people like us, because now we're like, wow, you know what? Like, we see what he's doing. We see what we're doing. We can kind of meld the two. We can, take from his example and try to push forward farther and, kind of pass the gauntlet. But until I can walk over and wave around my little metal cage and be like, look, a ghost bird, or, have something to show for it, nobody cares.
Do you think that's the difference between those, and I'm going to put just because we are always put in the same bucket, those who are into ufology, and because it is something we can physically see in the air, that they have some kind of floating disc and it's something tangible that they can capture on camera, versus looking at all of the science parameters behind an experiment or an investigation? Do you think that might be the difference there?
Honestly, I think, the more tangible evidence you can come up with, the more people pay attention to it. That's why, like, cryptid hunters or definitely if you want to look at like popularity, we're at the bottom tier of this paranormal little spectrum here. You got your cryptid hunters and your UFO hunters who can show more tangible evidence, footprints, photos, blurry video, whatever it is they have.
Right.
Tic Tac in the sky. Like they have something a lot more tangible to play with and be like, look what I found, look what I caught, look what we're doing. I mean, even some of these TV shows now, you get all these cryptid shows. I mean, how many cryptid shows do you know? There's a lot.
Honestly, I would say not many, because I don't pay attention to cryptids as much as you do. And that's just something that, because my focus is strictly on, ghostly paranormal, that's where my brain goes. And really the only extent that I have on ufology has all come from Skinwalker Ranch. And that's only because they use the same tools that we use out in the field. And I'm more like interested in those much bigger experiments.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because, people are like, it's almost like we got subdivided, it's like you got your UFO hunters, your cryptid guys, and your ghost hunters.
Right.
And we all use very, very similar pieces of equipment.
We do.
I mean, there's very few things you don't use across all three.
And I think that's where we need to find that difference. We've had some great people on the show this year where we were able to talk to them about different science pieces. You interviewed a few folks that I've replayed through this podcast about that are doing things differently and trying to understand those parameters and the things that affect the elements around us. And I think until we actually come up, if we keep going in this direction, I think between the two of us, we're going to end up talking to enough people to run these ideas by and really get something fully tangible, whether that's a full-blown conversation. And then, of course, the government will probably call us and and say, you found it. But I think the other piece of it is, until we have that one like solid piece of Bigfoot walking across the snowy banks of a mountain, or whatever it is that they caught, or Nessie, coming up out of the water. And until we have that type of evidence, that's something tangible and not something that's possible. So I think we need to take possible to here it is. It's tangible. You can hold it. Here's a picture. Here's an audio. This is exactly what happened. And you have enough witnesses to say this is absolutely, without a doubt, this was a ghost talking to us from the other side, and take it from there. I mean, we've talked about, Pearl Coran and her ability to write books through, spirit boards, Ouija boards. But how much of that did I put as a possible scam, that she was just trying to sell books? That was my skepticism towards the whole project when we discussed that. And I think that goes back, in time, that it has been about the almighty dollar. And can I make a buck from, telling people's fortunes and those kind of things? And that rings true today. That's the difference. So I think you're onto something with it being about the almighty dollar, and that it has to be something tangible instead of just a belief system. But yet I feel like with the amount of religions that are out there in the world and all of that, that is nothing more than a belief system.
True.
So who's to say that guys like us aren't going to come up with that evidence and say, here it is, and it either could go nowhere or it could take over the world as far as like what we've actually caught.
Or we go missing like the guy who had the TikTok video on giants. And be like, what happened to Nick and Josh? I don't know.
Yep, exactly. And I think that, and I hate to say it like that, but I'm almost afraid to find like too much of an evidence and air it out there, to like, where am I going to go? It's like the guy who invented the water engine. What happened to him? More conspiracy theories. There's a reason why we don't have water engines these days.
Right.
So what do you think it is that we need to do differently to really find that tangible piece of evidence for people to actually understand like what the hell it is that we're actually doing out here?
I honestly, I really think we need to get into the whole like ghost trap. Like we really need to find a way to either catch a ghost or seal it into a space that can be a Faraday cage, and then be able to pump that Faraday cage with enough positive ions to energize the electrical field slash spirit and make it visible, so that it can maybe interact and give us some kind of tangible evidence that it is present and, capable of, understanding what's going on. It's a, can't think of the word, but it's a, cognitive being.
Fair. So you're looking for something very cerebral to be able to talk to us back and forth, and we can actually visually see. And for lack of a better word, put in a big giant box in a museum somewhere where people can pay a ticket price and come see the ghost. Like, is that basically what?
I wouldn't
what
go
we're
as
after?
far as I wouldn't go as far as turning it into a zoo animal, because I don't know what kind of there's gonna be people outside picketing us, ghosts are people too, and there's way too much going on in that concept. But just being able to turn or figure out a way to make it tangible, to where we're able to actually interact with it, I think is where we're really after.
So do you think
so that we can have that conversation and we can have that interaction, and it can turn into, it goes from us hunting around in the dark trying to prove existence to having a conversation and being like, well, this was so and so, this is their name, their birth date, their information about them, what happened to them, how they died, like, that guy's guilty, you should have arrested him, just like this could be so much more if we really actually figured it out. And I think there's ways to do it. We just haven't put the science to it to try to make it work, because we're all too afraid to think, seriously about it for too long a period of time. And I almost hate the word, pseudoscience at this point because of it. And I'm almost starting to calling it like a parascience, just because it's like,
Yep.
We're trying to make this something serious, and it's hard to do so. But like I said, we don't have the funds to come up with an electro or EMF vacuum, and build a giant Faraday cage.
Now, that kind of, all of that, what you just said, kind of alludes me into kind of the next question of, do you think we're even on the same, are we on the right vein of where we need to be to follow the path to be able to do this? Or do you think like the tools and devices and the thought processes that we use are just for the money?
Honestly, everybody, like, somebody figured out, hey, EMF meters work. Cool. We can do so much with this. And then instead of figuring anything else out or pushing it to another extreme or making it something else, we were like, I can make money by making another device that does EMF. Like,
right.
And they've made 1,000 of them. And then some people were like, well, we can't do what that guy did. Let's make a big parabolic dish microphone. Cool. Now we got like 1,000 of those, a bunch of different types of recorders, and then they're like, oh, well, we need cameras in the dark. It's just like, okay, we can make 2 different types of those, and it's like, we take like such basic baby steps.
Yeah, we do.
Through the years, like, oh, EMF, we can see heat.
But let's compare this to an industry that, I'm pretty familiar with, the video game industry. Let's talk about, before 8-bit, but we'll start at 8-bit. All right. So 8-bit comes out. It's the greatest thing ever. And they ride it for how many years before they brought out the next, console to be played at home, thinking that the American public wasn't going to be ready for it. Now, I'll be honest with you. When I was first starting business, we'll just say working for retailers, coming out of high school, I'm running businesses, and I had a PDA, I had a cell phone, I had a camera, I had all of these things. And I just sat down one day and looked at all of the gadgets in front of me and said, what the fuck isn't there one device that does all of this? And then, bam, 15 years later, out comes like the smartphone. I'm like, wow, imagine that. A smartphone has everything in it. You don't need anything else. It even has the internet. You can access things. There's a cloud. Like, somebody really expanded on it. So I guess my theory behind this is how far away, if we keep, I don't want to say like pounding the pavement on how to expand our thinking away from just EM fields and camera, how could we get away from that and continue moving this forward where people are actually going to take this seriously? But you have already answered the question. We need something tangible.
Yeah, we need something tangible, and we need to find a way to, like, it's fine to continue to look at EMF, but we need to now look at it as, okay, we know EMF works. Why does it work? Okay, well, I theorize it works because they're made of an electrical magnetic field, and that's why they're able to interact with these devices. Cool. Now what do we do with that information? We have to move into, okay, well, how can we turn this into a way where we can visibly see that either A, there's an interaction happening, or B, the actual thing interacting. So then we need to look at, like, okay, well, what are ways to see EMF field? We have a thermal camera. That's the closest we've been able to get. Nobody else has been able to figure anything else out. Now, all of a sudden, you have people like Brandon Alvis, and he comes up with the EMCCD camera, which is a high-performing electron like camera, and it's basically very, very high caliber, fast moving particle. So, and he caught something manifesting on camera, and it's like, okay, wow, that's awesome. Now what do we do? Like that's from the time we started filming, ghost hunts, which was like 1990 ish, when Ghost Hunters Taps first hit the scene.
Yeah.
They were like founded the year I was born. And it's just recent in the last like 5 years that we have had somebody test something like the EMCCD camera. Okay, but the problem is that camera can cost $10,000 to $15,000.
Right.
It is not an accessible item, and like you have to know what the hell you're doing to even use it. So like kudos to the guy for coming up with an idea, and doing something really cool in the paranormal field. But nobody else can do it. Nobody else can even attempt to try to do it because of the pricing on this kind of stuff.
Well,
and even the people that are making all this money, that are running from the demons and, fighting the ghosts and, like they're not even attempting it with the money they have available.
So with any technology, it always tends to come down as it becomes more accessible and as that technology becomes more elementary in our way of thinking. So the hope is that, this camera that you're speaking of is going to become a little bit more accessible in the next, we'll just say 2 decades. As things, science really changes the field of how we actually look at things. But the next part of this isn't just about the equipment and the technology. It should be the methodology. And this kind of alludes to, I mean, it's going to go into the back half of the show, but, psychic and mediumship, where are the true psychics and mediums and what's the criteria of how we test them? And again, I'm not either one of those things to be able to know like what they go through to be accredited. I've talked to a few. They have licensure. I don't know what that looks like. So I'm not one to be able to speak about it intelligently, but I still think there is something to the way we think about the way humans used to be by studying our history, and I'm talking the Anunnaki. I'm speaking like ancient civilizations where there is talk of power and talk of mental capability that we obviously don't use today. It's not, and I don't believe it's from incapability. I believe it's because we're preconditioned to kind of go in that direction. So how much more could we understand about the afterlife and the spirit, quote unquote, if we were able to use that capability of our mind? And that's something completely that's not even in the realm of what we're even speaking about here. You and I mainly talk tech, but there's a whole nother element to this that we don't always bring up because it's not in our wheelhouse. But I think that there are those out there that are, falsifying the information. And I'm a psychic medium. I could read your tarot cards and do this or do that. And we talked about the shenanigans and the tomfoolery that goes on out there. But how much of this can we really tap into if we knew how to do it?
And I mean, there's been people that have tried to take this, and there was a show where they actually filmed in thermal, and they thermally filmed a medium interviewing someone and talking to this person.
Okay.
And as they talked to them, you could see like the heat rise from their body and reach, like it was reaching over to the other person to like make some kind of connection. And it was a really interesting like segment in the show where it almost looked like there was possibility of somehow proving that there is actually something going on during a medium's like channeling and trying to talk, to somebody. So it was really, really cool how it was done. And I want to say it was Ghost Hunters that did this, where they filmed a medium in thermal, which is, again, the closest we get to filming EMF.
So that brings up an interesting theory. Not that I'm saying I always put psychics or mediums underneath the Estes method on the interactive ghost hunting experience, but we do film everything with the thermal. So if somebody's being channeled, essentially, we might be able to see something, I don't want to say entering the person's body, their person, their mind. Like we should be able to see something if I have a strong enough conversation where I would consider that Estes method to be, fully successful, meaning 4 or more right answers in a 10-minute time frame. And that would be very interesting to see based off of everybody else around us. So I might have the, thermal imaging camera person actually start filming the rest of us viewers of the session along with the 2 people that I have blindfolded. That would be very interesting to watch. Very interesting. I never thought of that. I would love to find that. And if you have that video, I'd love to see it. But yeah,
I'll look it up.
Getting to the, the mindset of this, I think the SITC scoring system is a good bridge. I think it might even just be a couple of pillars of the bridge. Who knows? But at least it's something. We can get started somewhere. We can manipulate it. We can change it. The SITC scoring system is something that I'm constantly thinking about and obviously using because it comes out of the interactive ghost hunting experience. But I believe it's at least a good start on what somebody can take. And even if somebody takes that and I don't want to say manipulates it, but twists it into something a little bit further and a little bit more on the sciencey end of things, to kind of show a little bit more tangible evidence from different types of methodology and other technology of devices. I think that would be fascinating to watch. But I feel like with what I've created with that was just a very small, short bridge to get us started and to see where it's actually going to go. As far as the almanac goes, it's the exact same respect. Here's the data that was recorded. We have the SITC scoring system. What was the most active nights? What wasn't the most active nights? Is it a moon phase? Is it where the moon lands? In orbit? Is it dealing with the temperature? Is it the amount of ghost hunters? Is it dates relevant to the ghost? We don't know any of these things. And I think that's what I was so hesitant about, was because it's not conclusive data. It's just data. So that's kind of the difference of what I wanted to do with it versus what somebody might intend. Now, I put up there, know when to go ghost hunting. Like, that's the tagline for the almanac. But that knowing when is completely up to the user of the almanac. And that's kind of where I wanted to go with that whole piece. Was it's methodology and technology combined of what can we do to take this thing a little bit further than what we've already got.
True. And this is where we start to break into like the scientific method, because it's utilized in the almanac.
Right.
And it's utilized in the almanac because you're talking about all these things that can possibly have an effect. on the surroundings on the investigation and the technical experimentation happening during the investigation. So it really starts to break it down into what our variables are, how we deal with those variables, and like what we're doing to, I guess, document each one of them. So I mean, it really starts to break into like all the details of the scientific, method and how we are actually trying to push this the right direction.
And I think that's a perfect segue to go into a commercial break, because we're going to talk about the scientific method.
Hey, bearded ghost hunters. Are you taking care of your beard with all natural products? The Magnanimous Beard Superstore has everything you need, from beard oils, shampoos, beard butter, beard balm, and so much more. You can have any of their products scented with one of their amazing 45 cents. Head over to www.yourbeardsuperstore.com and use code GHOST at checkout to receive $5 off your order. Both Nick and Josh use these products daily, and our beards look and feel great and smell great too. Head over to yourbeardsuperstore.com and use code GHOST for your discount on these magnanimous products. You won't be disappointed. If you have a white or silver beard, they even have specialized products that will help keep the coloring of your beard. Use code GHOST at yourbeardsuperstore.com. This ad is Zeus approved.
All right, folks, we're back. Thanks for allowing us to put sponsors in the show. Josh is laughing because this is like take 2 or 3. We lost track. So
paranormally special.
Dude, paranormally special is not the name of the episode. He's gonna have to make me like put this as the name of the episode, everybody. Josh. So we're gonna discuss the scientific method, and I did put it in the 2025 Paranormal Investigation Workbook, but not necessarily in the correct order that is typically found. And apparently, according to this being take 2 or 3, not according to every other page on the internet, because that was the argument, was we had the wrong list in front of us. So the first one, Josh, we're going to let you take it since you're now correct.
It's make an observation.
And what does that observation mean?
Yeah, so we obviously start with an observation. So for the, I guess, for the purpose of going through the scientific method, the observation would be that something strange is happening at a location.
And it don't feel good?
Yeah, something strange is in the neighborhood. And we ask a question, which is step 2. So we ask if it is haunted.
We do ask ourselves if it's haunted, but I was going to make the joke, Josh. You ruined it. You ruined the joke. Damn it, Josh. Asking a question is this location haunted? Or is it, something of other man-made objects making the strange occurrences from the observation more legit? So that's the question at hand. Is this from man-made objects like electricity, faulty lines, any of those types of factors coming into play? And then you go into developing your hypothesis or prediction.
Which is using all of that information that you're gathering during trying to figure out what it is you think your opinion is.
Right.
So talking to the owners, learning about the house, what year it was built, the history of people who lived there.
When's the last time they got new electrical wiring? Those kind of things, like very, very specific questions. Testing to prediction, I would say, is definitely the investigation itself, using all of course, we always do like what we call, kind of like a pre-investigation to get baseline readings and things like that. So that way we're not mistaking, those kind of faulty lines or, creaks of the house moving and things like that as, goes during our regular investigation. But that's the testing of your prediction. Oh, I think this place might be haunted. And then the analyzing of results. So that's where I think things get interesting. Especially on our end, is because that's where you can put everything into the SITC scoring system worksheets and start to analyze what's really going on here. Do you have substantial readings? Do they stand out? Did you not get anything? That could also be results when there's zero type of activity coming out of this, when you had a baseline of this, the analyzing of all of those types of results. Record the results against your hypothesis. Like, looking at this, you say the question is it haunted, or is it, the faults of the house or the location? That's where you can kind of look at things and kind of put them together. So it's not just analyzing it, it's record the results against what you think it actually might be and kind of take things from there. But the conclusion, Josh, what do you think about the conclusion? Like, can we truly come up with, like, this is definitely super haunted, this is definitely not this is definitely not that?
I think utilizing things properly within the system kind of make it's the devil's in the details, because when you're testing the prediction, right, in the middle of the steps here, you're not just investigating, you're well, at least not investigating just the paranormal. You're investigating the creaks in the floors, and you're looking at all of those things you were talking about. We're taking down all the variables in the experiment. So we're testing the variables, we're taking them down and keeping a note so that we don't let them muddy the investigation or experimentation. So now we're testing the prediction with all the facts, doing it properly, and we are then analyzing the results, with a fine-tooth comb and a skeptical mind, because we're obviously not trying to jump directly into it. And once we've recorded the results and we've put it through the SITC scoring system, then the score at the end of it is basically our conclusion. And that's how we really develop the theory of, hey, you know what, your house scored higher than average, and we do believe it's haunted, or your house scored really low, and we actually think it's a plumbing issue, and this is why.
And I'm a person too to kind of take all of these steps and put them out of order, so that way we aren't so, I don't know, biased towards looking for specific things. So when you're, I guess, going through asking the questions of, is it haunted? And you're going through that portion of it, try not to learn too much. I would say learn more about the space itself. I mean, don't learn so much about your, alleged ghost that you know every fine detail about them, and, knowing all of the things that you possibly can, and make mountains out of molehills. Oh, it said red and I'm wearing a red shirt. That's really not how this shit goes. It's ask those questions, later, mix up these, I guess, levels and steps of the scientific method, but make sure that you do conclude all of them. Go through every single step, just not in this very specific order that typical science usually asks them for. So that way you're not biased at looking at specific things. And that's probably the biggest piece of advice I give to everybody, even from the tours. I'm not going to give you all the information. I'm going to withhold a lot. I'll reveal them afterwards to let you know if our 15 minutes of fame here in this one location actually prove true to anything that you're actually bringing up. So I do that every night just to kind of show people, the guests on the tour, like, it's not always about knowing everything about the ghost. I don't want you to know everything.
True. And I mean, honestly, I think it'd be really interesting to kind of write it out. The paranormal scientific method, like what it takes to make this work in our field. Because you're right, in some aspects, like you need that clarification and information prior, and in some cases you need it after the fact. So there is a really fine line that we are walking during attempting to apply the scientific method to our science. Because, like, could you pull some of these other things out of order? Possibly. I mean, we could be doing multiple nights of investigating, which means we'd be following this method multiple times and doing it over and over again, and then coming up with our conclusion after the fact. But that's, technically the testing process of it, because in a normal scientific experiment, they don't test it once. They test it a
Right.
lot.
Right. They do test it a lot. And I think and I'm going to be honest, this is just from my own observations. You could literally take every one of these steps except for make a conclusion out of order and put it somewhere else and see where it's actually going to fall. And that includes the observation and asking question, the very first things. Like you can put them later, make the observation after your hypothesis and say, well, it only worked on these days, or it was too inconsistent to, really conclude anything. Those observations could be something that require, like Josh said, a lot of testing. And I think with the amount of times that I visit the locations that I go to per year in the hundreds, that's where I think you're right. We probably do need a paranormal scientific method written up for the paranormal investigation workbook for 2026.
Yeah, and I think it might be where we really kind of start breaking this down into what it means. Because, I mean, I think tried and true scientific method, like, still technically works. And it works well for what we do. But I think it needs to be clarified for the paranormal. So I think it still should stay the way it is instead of moving things around, because technically, even as you're talking about moving things around, they still fall into the right steps. So making an observation still ends up going first, because no matter what, you are observing or listening to someone tell you something that's going on and making the observation of what, is possibly happening. And then you were asking the question or being asked the question of what is possibly happening. So, and then you're taking in that data, and you're doing the interview and you're asking the questions to come up and develop the hypothesis of what you think you're walking into, so that you can, figure out what pieces of equipment you're using, what's going to work best in this location, what is the best course of action for this location. You're then going into the investigation and testing all of these theories and all of the things that we put forth, to try and figure out what is best to figure this problem out. Because that's what it is we're doing, is we're figuring out a problem.
I think the other
has been presented.
I think the piece I may not have brought to light for you is when I do find a new haunted location and add it to the tour, it's some of it's by accident because it might be bleed over from another nearby location, and I have to do a lot of research. So yeah, the observation is there because I have something that I don't know what's going on, or I have a communication piece that doesn't make sense to the location I think I'm investigating. But some of these spaces, I've literally walked around with like the city of Charleston with a spirit box and a Mel meter, and I watch see what spikes simultaneously. So it's almost like I'm looking for those haunted locations without knowing that the place is haunted. So technically, I'm asking the question first of, okay, I know a lot of people died here. Could this be haunted? That's the question. Right. I don't have my observation yet.
True. So yeah, in a way, like, you've asked a question and now you're testing the hypothesis of the question you've made.
Correct.
And then finding your observation. So I get where you're going with it, but it's almost like we're adding steps to the front of it, because then after the fact you've made your observation, then you're like, okay, well, is this actually a haunted space or am I reading something else? So there's your question again.
Well,
and then you
not
go
necessarily.
Back into your normal.
I'm developing the hypothesis or prediction that I had activity on one specific night, so I'm going to go back on another night. So I'm testing the prediction. So I'm not making another observation. I want to test what I've already found, because I stumbled upon it when I thought that I might actually have something. So it's a possibility. There's a lot of ways we can rework this, and we could probably spend another hour discussing it. I'm sure that the listeners don't want to hear us go back and forth about the scientific method. But I see where you're going, and I think it needs to be worked out to where it is defined in the next investigation workbook. And I think that would be very, very helpful, for any paranormal researcher that, uses this workbook on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
So I think last but not least, the last thing we need to bring up, really, Josh, is all of the debunkers out there. We're talking about taking the field into a whole nother realm. Is this counterproductive, or is this something we actually need in the field? Like, what do you think?
It's a little bit of both. we've always stated that every investigator needs to be a healthy skeptic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've always stated that we approach everything skeptically. And once we have torn away all of the things we know to be true, can we look at it then and say, okay, this is paranormal? And that process becomes so much more fine-tuned that at some point, you know, we walk in and we're like, oh, you know, there's a ghost here. Everybody's like, well, how the hell do you know that? Well, because I've been doing this for so long that I've already stripped down everything I need to know about where I am, you know, and why the meter should be going off. Because I did my pre-walk. I know what does, you know, makes it spike and what doesn't. Like, I've already looked at the variables and all of these things. But it becomes problematic when we do our job, we do it thoroughly, and you have the guys that aren't. And skeptic and debunker are two different clarifications at this point.
They are. Agreed.
Because your skeptic is looking for, you know, what is a reasonable conclusion? You know, what is the Occam's razor, you know, explanation here? And they're trying to figure it out scientifically and come up with a conclusion. Your debunker walks into the situation and says, you're wrong. Plain and simple. They don't want you to be right. It's almost a counterproductive mindset. And I've never really met someone that clarifies or states themselves to be a debunker, you know, and is there with a good intention. Like they're like, I'm a debunker. You bring me your shit and I make it look bad. Like, that's my purpose in life. You know, you show me a ghost, I tell you it's a piece of paper. You know, like you give me proof and I'm gonna find every way I possibly can to degrade it, whether it's right, wrong, or in between. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a healthy skepticism when somebody approaches you and gives you something, but there's a certain point where we really need to start asking a different type of question instead of reprimanding someone for trying, you know, or trying to do something with the field. I mean, and I made a comment on social media the other day because somebody posted a video with this giant shark fin hanging out the water, and they're like, oh my God, megalodon sighting. And it's like, okay, when are we going to stop playing with the AI? You know, like, when are we going to stop fucking with things and start looking at this properly and start really thinking about the fact that, yes, you know, we only have explored, you know, X amount of space in our oceans, and we know more about space than we do the water under or in our own planet.
All right. I agree.
Like, there is possibilities, you know, for that kind of stuff, but it doesn't help when we muddy the water with every other fool that's got an AI on their phone that's having a good old time and trying to make views out of it.
Yep, and I completely agree with you. And as far as the debunkers versus skeptics, I mean, I kind of see a small mix of debunkers from the tours, but I do see a whole hell of a lot of skeptics. And what I tell them, and I've said this before on the show, is, you know what, you paid good money for these tickets. You know, your family wants to be here. Just have a good time. You're going to hear some weird histories around Charleston. You know, if you don't get into the equipment, you're going to have a job anyway. So learn about some tech that you might not know about. And again, have fun with it. Like, I don't care about your skepticism. Like, you don't need to ridicule, you know, what the rest of these people paid for and for what I'm trying to show them how to do. And I always go at it with, well, this could have been a great possibility, you know, of whatever might actually be happening. I never say, well, that's so-and-so. They said this all the time. You know, it's always, well, we see that pattern. You know, we get that name here a lot. Or, you know, I see this number here a lot. And it could be related to the fact that was this person's birthday. You know, I always give them that, like, it's a half and half. Like, it's a pattern because I've done the experiments hundreds and hundreds of times. but it's also a possibility that it's just coincidence, even though I don't believe in that kind of coincidence where I see those kind of patterns over and over and over and over again like that. So I agree with you. I think we need, as far as paranormal investigators and researchers, we need that skepticism within ourselves. Do I feel like we need people full time going out trying to debunk shit? I really don't. I really don't think like we need, when we're trying to push this from a pseudoscience into something that's more recognizable in the science field, debunking things is only making, like you said at the top of the show, it's making us look even further, and we're having to fight even harder. And I think if we had more open mindset people to realize that there are things in this world, might not be on this quantum plane, but there are things in this world that we don't understand. And as long as we can at least take an open look at, okay, Nick said, let's try this scoring system, or he said, let's try this, type of quantum mechanics. We need to look at photons instead of, UV rays or whatever it is that we're trying to study. Let's take a look at it. Let's see if we can not debunk it, but is it possible? And in the meantime, learn something about those photons, so that way you have a different perspective on something else later on. It's kind of the same process of, when we had your brother on the show, he said, you're going to discover something else whenever you're experimenting, looking for one thing, you're going to discover something else. And I feel like that's, entirely true in this process. So again, skeptics and debunkers out there, again, not doubting your full-time gig, because if that's what you want to do with your life, instead of trying to be a little bit more open to the idea that you don't understand everything, because Josh and I don't understand everything. We barely understand the shit that we are working with. And we're in the field a whole lot more than a lot of other paranormal researchers out there. Again, not trying to like throw you guys under the bus. I'm definitely not going to be calling anybody out, but at the same time, have a little bit of, I guess, encouragement that somebody might actually be onto something in this field to take it to that next level, instead of, okay, they got another EM device, you know what I mean? Like, that's what they're using these days, and then showing us all how it doesn't work. Again, it's EM fields. We'll talk about it. It's an EM device. It's another one, because that's what we fully understand that might be interacting with anything not from this earth. So in the afterlife. But that's kind of my 2 cents on the whole ordeal. Is I don't think we need people full time. They're diehard going after this. It just feels very negative. And again, there's that hashtag out there, para community, and they're definitely not part of that. You know what I mean? I don't know what their hashtag community would be, and I don't feel like I'm fully, part of the para community either. I think by working, very, I guess, closely with you and running things by a very short list of selected people, I'm able to concentrate a whole hell of a lot better on my focused intent than I am worrying about all of the debunkers out there. And there's another reason why I don't post a lot of my evidence out there either, is because it is part of that very open forum of everybody with AI. And again, I don't have time to weed through all of the, hey, that's AI. I'm like, well, shit, no, it's not, dude. Like, because I don't produce evidence out of AI. That's not what I do. These. So again, that's my 2 cents. I feel like with what you and I have been working on the past year and a half is, with the investigation workbook, the almanac, and picking each other's brains. I mean, dude, you've taught me a shit ton of things about the science behind the equipment, just since we've been doing this podcast together, and, just private conversations. And I know you've picked my brain on certain things, but that's only because I see things on a larger scale, because I do it more often, I guess, because I have that opportunity. We work very well together. And I think that's what a lot of the paranormal community actually needs, is they need that one or two buddy that they, can work with. I don't feel like we need, don't get me wrong. I've worked with, paranormal teams in the past where there was 4, 5, 6, 8 people. I just feel like sometimes it can be a little too much if there's not like one true lead, and then everybody's asking you a million questions in the process. I think, 1 to 3 people, like-minded folks that have been working together for a while, understand each other's mindset. That's how I feel like this field should be done. I know a lot of paranormal investigative leaders would disagree with me. Like, they want as many people in different corners as they can. But I would rather, have, 3 cooks in the kitchen than, 1 cook and 5 dishwashers. Like, that's just kind of how I feel about the whole scenario. But any final thoughts on wrapping up this episode? I think we went through a lot with this one too. Like, I know I say that with every episode, but damn, we really like pushed the envelope on this one with the scientific method and what can we do differently? How can we look at things differently? Obviously, we talked about the SITC scoring system. So, final thoughts? What do you got?
You know what? I encourage people to continue to try to push on what they're doing in the paranormal field, and try and come up with something unique. Try and come up with something different, and be paranormally special.
We're still going with the paranormally special. Wow, we're even going to end the special. Josh. Anyway, I agree. And if you do have something that you're working on, of course, we want to hear from you. We are still looking for writers for the next Paranormal Investigators Almanac for 2026. Even if you're not that great of a writer, I'm a pretty decent editor, so that's okay. We still want to talk to you. I can help you along. We can get that article, you can write the article and I will help get it to publication. So we can talk about your idea or proven theory. And of course, if you would like to be a bonus episode guest for the Stories in the Cemetery podcast, we also encourage you to reach out to us. We're always looking for innovators, people that are looking to get their ideas out there, the same way that Josh and I do through this podcast. Come teach us something. Like that's the basic gist and the criteria that we're looking for. What can you teach us, or what can you take any of our ideas that you might know something a little bit further about or have a different perspective of, and we can obviously discuss as 3 people or 4 people, up on the screen and see how it actually turns out. You can always reach us at storiesinthecemetery at gmail.com, or you can just go to our social medias. You can find us at Amen Paranormal Research on every platform, and Stories in the Cemetery on every platform. So with that, guys, thanks for listening, and we will catch you in 2 weeks.
Stay paranormally special.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Stories in the Cemetery podcast. You can follow your host, Nicholas McGirr, on most social media platforms under the name Stories in the Cemetery. If you'd like to follow co-host Joshua Amen, you'll find him under the name Amen Paranormal Research. Be sure to check out the show notes for any links to specific articles written by your hosts and all the references used to create this episode. Happy hunting. We'll see you on the next episode of the Stories in the Cemetery podcast.